On the morning of June 3rd, 2026, the neighborhood of Haus Rani was waking up to a sweltering Delhi summer. This is an urban village, a dense, layered maze of concrete where towering residential blocks press tightly against each other, creating a claustrophobic density that defines much of the city's modern expansion. Tucked into these narrow lanes was the Flourish Stay Bed and Breakfast. Because of its close proximity to premier hospitals like Max Healthcare and Saket, the guest house served as a vital, affordable transit hub. It was filled with out-of-state families and international medical tourists. That morning, over 40 people were inside. The Agarwal family had traveled from Rajasthan and Bengaluru to care for an ailing relative. Next door, citizens from Liberia, Nigeria, and Turkmenistan were starting their day, having crossed the globe relying on the promise of world-class medical infrastructure. Down in the basement kitchen, a routine task went completely wrong. At 8:20 a.m., a hotel cook stepped away from a commercial oil fryer. The unattended oil rapidly heated past its auto-ignition threshold and, within seconds, flashed over into a violent chemical fire. In a legally compliant building, a kitchen fire triggers a predictable chain of events. Smoke detectors scream, automated sprinklers flood the room, and fire doors lock down the corridors to allow an orderly evacuation. At Flourish Stay, none of those things happened. Instead, 22 people would lose their lives. A localized kitchen accident scaled into a mass casualty disaster because the building itself was rigged against its occupants. Every structural choice surrounding that basement kitchen had been engineered to maximize profit, inadvertently turning the guest house into an inescapable trap. Official plans show a 6-room layout, but the owner illegally carved a 25-room maze. The illegal basement was packed with combustible cardboard. When ignited, the solitary staircase acted as a chimney, funneling toxic smoke into the sleeping corridors, blocking the exit. To project an upscale image, the front of the guest house was wrapped in a continuous facade of toughened glass. While it looked premium from the street, it completely sealed the structure from outside air, trapping the rapidly expanding smoke indoors. As the fire melted the electrical wiring, a sudden power failure knocked out the building's electronic door control buttons. With the heavy glass doors dead and no manual overrides in the dark, the guests found themselves physically locked inside a vacuum rapidly filling with carbon monoxide. Each illegal partition, each blocked exit, and each cosmetic upgrade removed a vital layer of safety. The pursuit of maximum rental yield stripped away every escape route, weaponizing the architecture against the people sleeping inside. The structural flaws were compounded by human error during the critical initial window of the emergency. For 30 agonizing minutes, the hotel staff noticed the smoke but chose not to trigger an alarm or wake the guests. They tried to fight the chemical fire themselves in silence before fleeing the building. The first official call for help to the Delhi Fire Service wasn't placed until 8:50 a.m. By the time emergency operators dispatched the trucks, the building was already entirely consumed by the blaze, and frantic guests were calling their families from inside the sealed rooms. When the fire engines finally arrived, they hit a dead end. Haus Rani's historical geography features lanes so narrow that the heavy fire tenders physically could not maneuver through them. Firefighters had to abandon the trucks at the main road and haul their hoses and equipment down the tight alleys by hand. Inside, the situation collapsed into absolute chaos. Choking on the thick smoke, trapped guests began using whatever they could find to shatter the heavy upper-floor windows. Below, local residents and firefighters scrambled to lay down mattresses on the asphalt as people leaped from the upper floors to escape the flames. The 30-minute delay gave the fire total control of the structure, while the impenetrable urban geography choked off the rescue teams. Once the flames took hold, pulling everyone out safely was physically impossible. 22 people perished in the smoke and heat. Among them was 16-year-old Pearl Agarwal, who had just celebrated scoring 97% on her board exams, alongside a dozen foreign nationals who had traveled thousands of miles seeking healing, only to die in an unlicensed room. To understand how a deadly, uninspected hotel was allowed to operate in plain sight, you have to look at the land itself. Haus Rani falls under the historic Lal Dora classification. Decades ago, this was a zoning exemption created to protect rural village habitations from strict modern city building bylaws as Delhi expanded. Over time, commercial developers aggressively exploited this historical loophole. They bought up plots in these exempted zones and constructed towering, multi-story commercial structures without ever obtaining valid no-objection certificates from the fire department, completely skipping mandatory safety features like automated sprinklers. The sheer scale of the negligence triggered a massive police response. Authorities invoked heavy charges under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, including culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Within days, the building owner, the hotel cook, and the accountant were tracked down, arrested, and remanded to judicial custody. The shockwaves of the tragedy reached the highest judicial authority in the country. The Supreme Court of India intervened directly, pointing to the charred remains in Malviya Nagar to aggressively question civic bodies across the national capital region about the unchecked growth of these illegal structures. Forced into action, the Municipal Corporation of Delhi launched a sweeping enforcement drive. Across the city, municipal workers began aggressively sealing and bricking up unauthorized commercial operations that had been hiding within dense residential pockets. A booming metropolis and a thriving medical tourism industry mean very little if the basic structures housing people are built to burn. The blackened shell of Flourish Stay stands as a permanent reminder. When legal loopholes are leveraged to prioritize profit over civic safety, the true cost is always paid in human lives.